Afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to our second of 5 public hearings on the New York State Foundation Aid formula. My name is Anita Murphy. I previously served as the district superintendent at Capital Region BOCES. Before that, I was a superintendent and deputy superintendent in both Rochester and Syracuse. I am joined today by the Director of Education Policy Studies, Brian Backstrom, and Dr. Lisa Parshall, Professor of Political Science at Damon University and Rockefeller Institute Fellow. Just some housekeeping notes. As a reminder, the hearing is being live streamed, and a recording of the meeting will be posted on the Rockefeller Institute's website directly after tonight's meeting. Some audience members may be recognizable in the footage. By staying, you are consenting to be in the background of today's recordings. Today we also have an ASL interpreter with us who will be providing services. And although we do not have other simultaneous interpretation services on site today, a transcript of today's hearing will be provided in multiple languages and posted online for public access. If you have any questions about the Foundation Aid study or about this hearing, or if you are in need of assistance, please talk to one of our event staff, wonderful event staff, who are in the back of the room. We have an emergency exit located in the back, and if it really got bad, you can go right outside here. And before we begin, I'm going to ask everybody if they would silence their cell phones, please. As we proceed with verbal testimony, we're hoping to have quiet in the room so that our listening panel can hear what y'all have to say. Some very important thank yous. On behalf of the Rockefeller Institute, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to Principal Carla Graves and the staff of the North Park Community School. Thank you so much. I know it doesn't look like a big deal, but people have been planning this for many, many weeks, and we really appreciate the school's cooperation and the staff's help. Thank you for being incredibly gracious hosts. So just some background and context. The purpose is to hear voices from the New York State education community on the Foundation Aid formula. The enacted 24-25 budget called for the Rockefeller Institute to conduct a study to assess how the Foundation Aid formula works and discuss potential modifications to that formula. As a part of the study, researchers at the Rockefeller Institute are collecting feedback from the public, that's all of you, through in-person and verbal testimony we'll be hearing today. Just on a note, if folks are here and they were not asked to provide testimony and wish to, you can always do that in writing on the Rockefeller Institute's website. So from the first portion of the hearing, from 2 o'clock till about 4:15 today, we have invited speakers to speak on the Foundation Aid formula. And for the second portion, from 5:30 to 7:30, members of the public can share verbal feedback on the Foundation Aid formula. Feedback from both portions will be incorporated into the study and will inform the final report. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brian Backstrom, Director of Education Policy Studies, to provide some comments and remarks about the Foundation Aid study being conducted. Brian?
Thank you, Anita. And again, I am Brian Backstrom, Director of Education Policy Studies here at Rockefeller Institute. Normally, these introductory remarks would be offered by our president, Bob Megna, and he sends his apologies. He's dealing with an injury that prevented him, as of this morning, from making the trip out here. But he did also want me to convey his genuine appreciation for each and every one of you here, for Buffalo Public Schools, and for North Park Community School for giving us this opportunity to do what we think is really important outreach. We're trying to talk to as many stakeholders from as many groups in as many areas as we can. We're always open, we're always available to talk about this important thing. It is important. The state constitution enshrines in it a right to a sound basic education for every student. And the development and implementation of the foundation aid formula that really took hold in 2007 was a big deal. It was a long process with a lot of ups and downs, and got messy and stayed pretty messy. It's now the job of the Rockefeller Institute to do some analysis on the formula, looking for ways that we might be able to improve it, surely to update it, all with the intent of improving the way that the state delivers state education aid to almost 700 individual school districts across New York. The formula, as it is difficult to understand. It's opaque, to say the very least. But troubling, too, is that it relies on things like student poverty data that's almost a quarter century old. So we're not only relying on our own analysis, but comments from the field about ways to look at the formula differently, ways to improve it, to improve its content, to improve its process, and to improve the implementation of the formula. Just a couple of quick slides, if I could. Want to let you guys know, and people who are listening on the live stream, that there are ways that we have set up intentional ways for people to speak at a public forum if they want to, but importantly also to submit written testimony. Sometimes that can be more comprehensive or more specific. We've gotten over 120 submissions already. We're reading all of them and following up. It gives us the opportunity to do more direct outreach to some of the groups that have submitted these testimonies. So please don't hesitate, even if you're speaking tonight, don't hesitate to supplement your comments here with written testimony. We've also sent out notices to administrators in every single school district across the state, to every one of our state assembly members, to every one of our state senators. We've distributed it through the networks at the state education department and through all of our contacts in the media with one goal, to gather as much information as possible about the foundation aid formula from the public in the short timeline that we've been given. We have done direct outreach to individual associations, set up individual meetings in our office over Zoom. We're happy to continue doing that. If you ever think that you want to have a more private session, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Rockefeller Institute. We'll put something on the calendar and give a time that we can have a good discussion. I do want to note the short URL that's here on the slide, rockinst.org/FA. Please visit that page. It has links to our speaker registration forms for future hearings, written comment and submission forms, and it provides a little more background on the foundation aid study process that we're doing. This is the timeline that we're looking at. Towards the end of April, we were given the charge to undertake this analysis. This is the second of our 5 public hearings. We have 3 more, one on Long Island, one in a rural district, and then one in the Albany area. We're keeping the written submission process open for several weeks after that. We're closing it only on September 6th, so please use that opportunity as well. And our report is due to the governor and legislative leaders by December 1. Just to provide a little visual, in case you might not be familiar with it, this is a summary, which is kind of interesting, and a simplification of the foundation aid formula that we're dealing with. Each one of these boxes is a process, is a step in the development of the formula, in a calculation of aid delivered and local revenue to be received. How we view our task is to look at every single one of those boxes and to consult with the experts, including district budget officials who deal with this on a regular basis, and find out ways that we should be looking at it differently, improving, updating, streamlining, and really trying to provide some transparency to districts and to the public. We like people to know why they're getting the money they're getting and what it's for. That would be a big step forward in the process, and we hope that's some of what we can do. With that, just want to allow our member of our listening panel to introduce herself, and then we'll get right to the public hearing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Lisa Parshall. I'm a distinguished professor of political science and public policy at Damon University in Amherst here, and also a fellow at the Rockefeller Institute, where I do work in local government and state and local politics.
Thanks. So we're going to start our public hearing now. I'm going to ask that people stay within their 6-minute allotted timeline. I have a clock. There's a clock on the podium. When you come to the podium, when you're at the halfway point, it's going to change color. And if you get to 6 minutes and you're not done, I'm going to interrupt you. So please excuse me on the front end of that. And just a reminder that these hearings and what Rockefeller was commissioned to look at is the foundation aid study, not education policy. And so I think that's critically important as we begin the hearings. When the hearing is over, we're going to ask folks to leave so that our staff can take a break before the evening portion. And we'll ask if the panel has any questions. It will be just clarifying questions. It will not be a back and forth generally, if they have questions at all. So I'm going to ask Samuel Radford to come to the podium, New York State Education Equity Task Force.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, go Bills. Keep things important. My name is Samuel L. Radford III. I'm a longtime parent advocate, president of Buffalo Public Schools District Parent Coordinating Council from 2007 to 2019, and the current co-convener of the Western New York Education Equity Task Force and a member of the New York Equity Coalition. We have been working on equity in education for a long time. As a matter of fact, when we started talking about the campaign for fiscal equity, when we started fighting on that, I had black hair. So this has been a long time fight. A lot of stuff that I'm going to say, you've already said, Brian, but I'm going to repeat it because it bears repeating. The foundation aid formula has a profound impact on students in Western New York, particularly students of color and those from low-income backgrounds. For years, the needs of these students have been growing, yet districts have been hamstrung due to consistent underfunding of the foundation aid formula. This formula was not fully funded until this school year, 17 years after it first passed by the state. A 2018 Alliance for Quality Education report revealed that the state underfunded 25 high-needs majority Black and Latinx school districts, including Buffalo, by $2.6 billion, exacerbating the challenges faced by our districts even before the pandemic. Now, the pandemic only magnified these challenges. Multiple studies have shown that students of color and students with low-income backgrounds disproportionately experience unfinished learning. This is starkly illustrated by the 2022 and 23 New York State assessment scores. Only 27% of Buffalo's third graders were proficient in reading, and only 13% of Buffalo's eighth graders were proficient in math. Additionally, statewide, from 2022 NAEP scores shows that New York ranks 37th in 4th grade reading and 46th in 8th grade math. While we are grateful for the foundation aid formula is finally fully funded, more is needed to address the deep-seated challenges created by years of underfunding and the pandemic. We agree that the foundation aid formula needs to be updated and improved. However, any changes must be equity-focused, and I want to emphasize that. The changes must be equity-focused. Current student outcomes make clear that any funding cuts to Buffalo or other school districts in West New York would likely only exacerbate equity gaps across the region. Buffalo and other West New York districts have been making important new investments in evidence-based reading and math instruction, and any reduction in state aid could jeopardize their impact. Before sharing recommendations, I want to note that we are concerned with the aggressive timeline that you just showed up here, Brian. We urge a comprehensive and data-driven process that prioritizes the needs of students over any state, fiscal, or political considerations. The current timeline and summer stakeholder engagement do not allow for sufficient involvement from all parties. We hope that this study will be the first step in a longer-term comprehensive process that includes the legislature, governor, and additional experts and stakeholders across the state before any legislative action is taken. Our first recommendation is on base costs. New York currently determines the base formula cost for using the successful school district model. This model, not updated by the New York State Education Department since 2012, does not reflect changes in state standards and assessment and is not representative of the large urban and small rural district. As a result, it does not accurately reflect the base cost successfully educating students. Regional Cost Index. The Regional Cost Index reflects analysis of regional labor market costs, but this data has not been updated since 2006 and does not reflect current market costs in high-price areas such as New York City. This study should explore updates at the Regional Cost Index. Poverty. The current formula uses the combination of a number of students eligible for free and reduced lunch and the number of students, number of school-age children and families below the poverty threshold using the U.S. Census data. Unfortunately, free and reduced lunch measure is often inaccurate and less reliable since the adoption of the federal community eligibility provision. Additionally, NYSED continues to use 2000 census poverty data even though annual updates are available. I see that I'm down in less than a minute, so I just want to make sure we include that we have recommendations. You'll get this in our written recommendations related to the multilingual learners, so the study should explore the differentiated weights by proficiency levels and the types of services and programs. This study should explore the costs associated with educating subgroups of multilingual learners, such as students with interrupted formal education. And the final one is with student disabilities and as well as students with in temporary housing and foster care. So we have recommendations on that. And also we think there should be something on data transparency. So let me just finish reading this last one. We recommend improving and reinstating the New York State school funding transparency forms, which districts were required to submit to the state education, by state education law 3614 from 2018 to 2023. And we are recommending that that be reinstated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you
we
very
also
much.
would love to invite you to get some student input. We are having a Igniting Equity in Education Forum, and if you want to get some student input, we will be happy to share that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Richard Nigro, President of the Buffalo Teachers Federation. Oh, and I'm sorry, Michelle. Michelle Licht, President of the Williamsville Teachers Association.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Rich Nigro, and I'm the president of the Buffalo Teachers Federation, a union representing some 3,800 teachers, Buffalo public school teachers. And those teachers are responsible for the education of some 30,000 students. When I first drafted my statement today, I planned on talking about numbers, how the Pupil Needs Index is based on census data from 24 years ago. Brian, I think you might have stole a lot of thunder when you first opened this up. You probably hear a lot of the same information. And how foundation aid amount is based on the successful school model, and that hasn't been updated since 2016, and therefore it doesn't reflect current costs. But I suspect as you conduct these hearings, this will rightfully so be a common thread. So instead, I'll share with you a few real-life experiences that relay the necessity of updating the foundation aid formula and ensuring New York continues to fully fund school districts across this state. There's so many challenges facing today's students, particularly regarding their social and emotional wellness. The job of teachers is, of course, to help students navigate these challenges while teaching whatever curriculum they were hired to teach. That job becomes increasingly difficult when underfunded. The National Association of Social Workers suggests a caseload of no more than 25 individuals per social worker. Currently, social workers in Buffalo can have caseloads of 50 or more students for whom they are responsible. Because their caseloads have ballooned to these current numbers, many are bound to service almost exclusively students of special needs who have IEPs, 504s, because the language of those plans may mandate it. And often this means that mainstream students, possibly suffering from depression, anxiety, anger control issues, etc., may not receive services because there's not enough staff. Buffalo is also a sanctuary city that has had an incredible influx of ENL students. Whether they have limited or no English proficiency, those students are expected to pass the same classes and take the same Regents exams as their English-speaking counterparts. A more fully robust and fully funded foundation aid budget would help front-load our schools with the support needed to help these students achieve success in their academic lives. In 2007, foundation aid was born after the state combined roughly 30 various educational funding sources into a single source, using a formula intended to ensure equitable funding allocation to schools based on their current needs and resources. Equitable and current are the two crucial words in this sentence. To ensure equitability, you must base your calculations on current data. If you were to create a home budget based on grocery and gas prices from 2006 or 2016, you'd find it impossible to keep your cupboards stocked and your gas tank full. By updating the foundation aid formula and committing to fully funding it, New York would be ensuring our schools have what they need to best serve our children and our communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Michelle Light. I'm a fourth grade teacher in the Williamsville Central School District and a member of the New York State United Teachers Executive Committee. Fully funding and appropriately distributing foundation aid is crucial to providing the sound education our students deserve. We fear the proposed cuts to school funding in the 2024 executive budget reflect a desire to limit school aid just a year after the formula was fully funded for the first time in history. We are just beginning to realize the benefits and meet our promises to the next generation, with New York schools starting to lead the way in preparing the workers and citizens of tomorrow. With recent full funding, schools have been able to meet diverse student needs, especially in mental health support. Students need to feel safe and supported to make educational gains. They need counselors, social workers, and psychologists, and these professionals must be accessible to all students when they need them. Full funding has also helped to address longstanding learning gaps. Our district has added math specialists and learning labs to support struggling students. STEM and hands-on learning programs, which prepare students for future jobs, are also at risk without sufficient funding. Almost 10% of high school students in my district enroll in CTE programs to prepare them for the jobs of the future. Instead of overhauling the funding formula to focus on cost reductions, we should update formula data to better serve our students. The average per pupil spending calculation must include factors like mental health, housing insecurity, and special education needs. In my district, over 10% of students are in special education programs. These programs require not only different staffing ratios, but also a multitude of supports, including speech-language pathologists, occupational and physical therapy, behavior consultants, and adaptive physical education classes. The per pupil allowance needs to ensure all students receive what they need to be successful, not just the bare minimum. The Pupil Needs Index also needs updating to reflect current poverty data and the diverse needs of English language learners. My district has over 450 English language learners from 38 countries, and they speak 36 languages, and the current formula does not adequately support them. Any adjustments to the state funding formula should recognize the critical importance that schools play in the lives of families, students, and the well-being of entire communities. Public schools are the centers of our communities and should be funded accordingly. We can't keep asking our schools and teachers to do more with less support. Although every district is impacted differently, every district is impacted, which means that every one of our students is impacted. New York State promised students to fund their education and now needs to follow through on that promise for the next generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Capuana, District Superintendent of Erie 1 BOCES.
Good afternoon, distinguished representatives of the Rockefeller Institute of Government. My name is Dr. Michael Capuana, and I'm here representing Erie 1 BOCES, one of the 37 BOCES in New York State. We are a regional education cooperative serving 19 school districts with varying socioeconomic statuses across Erie County, ultimately impacting over 65,000 school-age children. Our organization provides K-12 and adult workforce programming, administrative support, and technology solutions to our component school districts. We host the Western New York Regional Information Center, or WNYRIC, which supports the technology needs of over 100 districts across 7 counties. Thank you for the opportunity to share perspective regarding equitable and sustainable education funding. The foundation aid formula, central to New York State's school funding since 2007, has been essential in supporting the success of all school districts across the state. However, socioeconomic and educational shifts over the past 17 years necessitate a thorough review and updating of the formula. Although we do not receive foundation aid, the sustained financial health of our component school districts directly impacts our capacity to offer robust, innovative, and efficient educational opportunities and support. Consistent and equitable funding through foundation aid allows Erie 1 BOCES to sustain important services with the goal of ensuring that every child, regardless of background, has access to a quality educational experience. We advocate for a foundation aid formula that is more equitable, predictable, and flexible. Funding must be based on student needs, which have and will continue to evolve as district demographics change. For Erie 1 BOCES, this means continuing to anticipate and respond with essential student programming and services for our 19 component districts. Locally, we have prioritized an increased focus to expand our capacity to support school districts as we collectively strive to serve a growing number of historically underserved and often marginalized student populations. More specifically, across Erie 1 BOCES' 19 component school districts, since the 2000 census, school-aged children in Western New York living in poverty has increased by 40%. Over the course of the last decade, students classified with disabilities have increased by 13%, and students identified as English language learners have increased by 129%. Updating the foundation aid formula, which currently relies on outdated and disparate data, is critical in supporting our efforts to serve children and school districts. BOCES of New York State play a vital role as regional conveners, providing innovative solutions for county-wide educational needs. I would like to offer 3 examples of Erie 1 BOCES initiatives that rely on adequate district funding for the betterment of students across the region. First, we are actively developing an exceptional education expansion plan tailored to meet the increasing demand for special education services and student placements across Erie County. Second, following the pandemic and through partnership with multiple districts and agencies, we initiated the Western New York Supporting Mental Health and Advocating for Resources Together, also known as the SMART Collaborative, to promote mental health support for youth and families in Erie County. Finally, we actively collaborate with our districts and higher education colleagues to address teacher and leader shortages on a regional level. These initiatives are possible due to partnership and predictable education funding. Moreover, the recent Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations will require school systems to adapt and adjust. No doubt this will demand ongoing regional collaboration. At its core, Foundation Aid provides the financial stability for Erie-Wombosis to lead regional collaboration and directly support necessary educational reform efforts. In short, we are advocating for equitable access and high-quality educational opportunities for all learners. Erie-Wombosis serves urban, suburban, and rural communities, each with unique needs. Neighboring districts can vastly differ, and funding based on simple enrollment figures oversimplifies complex issues. We support the Rockefeller Institute of Government's comprehensive review of the Foundation Aid formula. In addition to modernizing the formula at the state level, I believe there is a parallel and emerging opportunity to address evolving educational needs at a local level through meaningful dialogue and innovative regional solutions. Foundation Aid is a critical issue in education and in the development of our state identity and potential. This decision will contribute to the story of what Western New York and New York State will look like in the future. We must ask ourselves what we want this story to be. How might we better support our students, educators, and families to articulate and enact that vision? The students sitting in local classrooms today will determine the future success of New York State. Therefore, access to quality educational experiences should not simply be determined by location. By addressing current deficiencies in the funding formula and incorporating a contemporary understanding of our shared educational needs, New York State can ensure all students have the resources necessary for a sound basic education and a successful future. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Cynthia Gallagher, Director of Governmental Relations for the New York State Administrators Association.
I'd like to start by thanking the Rockefeller Institute and the distinguished panel before us for the opportunity to provide input on the Foundation Aid as the governor and legislature undertake a re-examination of this important formula. My name is Cynthia Gallagher, and I am the Director of Government Relations for the School Administrators of New York State. We represent over 22,000 members that represent building administrators and program directors, principals, assistant principals, deans, directors of instruction. SANES is honored to have been an integral part of many of the deliberations on Foundation Aid with the Governor's Office, the legislature, state ed, and our esteemed colleagues on the Educational Conference Board. Revising the Foundation Aid formula is an important undertaking at this point in time. As administrators, we have seen firsthand the impact of the pandemic, the continuing impact of the pandemic. We see clearly the dramatic increases in mental health and instructional needs of our students. But as though the pandemic highlighted, those changes were already evidenced in our many school districts. The needs of students and additional requirements of school districts have dramatically changed since the inception of the Foundation Aid formula. Revising that formula must ensure that the funding keeps pace with the changing demographics and corresponding student needs. For building administrators, there were in 2023, two priorities that they identified. In that part of the pandemic, it was staffing requirements and the mental health needs of students. A similar survey for the 23-24 school year indicated that their highest priorities were indeed staffing requirements and student attendance, quite different sets of priorities. You will see those play out in this discussion of administrators' priorities for the foundation, for the Foundation Aid. Two key principles for administrators: that it must meet the needs of students and staff, and the formula must be stable and predictable. A key component of the Foundation Aid is the amount per pupil. This is the projected amount of educating a student in a successful school. We've heard that from our esteemed speakers in our prior testimonies. In 2007, that amount was estimated as $5,258. Effectively educating a student in 2024 is far different than the 2007 costs. The changing profiles of students and the additional roles that schools have taken on must be incorporated into the newly revised formula. This could be done in several ways. One variable used to determine the cost of education is student poverty. We've heard that in prior testimony. The data used could be updated, or other sources could be used. When allocating the federal ARP monies, certainly alternative calculations for poverty were used. Direct certification could be considered, or updating regional costs could also be considered. Secondly, increased weighting could be given to students' need within the formula. Weightings within the formula could be adjusted, or in fact, different variables that more adequately affect the cost of educating effective students could be used. Perhaps homeless counts, increased tier weightings of special education, or even mental health variables. Lastly, the overall influence of student need in the entire formula could be, that influence could be emphasized greater in the total formula. Stability and predictability. The unilateral revisions made to the foundation aid component, the foundation aid formula during the budget process is not helpful to districts. A revised formula must be composed of reasonable variables and applied consistently as required in the statute. For example, in FY 2025, the inflation rate which was used was not the one that was in statute. In other years, a fiscal cap was placed on education funding prior to letting the formula run. In other years, programs such as community schools are embedded right within the foundation, and a cutout is made for those programs, even though that isn't a part of the formula. Regional cost indices. Certainly, like districts must be treated similarly. Districts in very close geographic proximity often have varying regional cost indices applied, and yet the actual regional costs are very similar. This results in quite varying district funding for those in regional proximity. An increased number of regions could be explored to more capture the nuances of that regional cost. And lastly, student enrollment attendance. Throughout the foundation aid formula, various student council enrollments are used. As you heard, one of the priorities for our members is certainly student attendance. It is very difficult to use point-in-time figures for attendance when, in fact, districts are having different numbers throughout the school year due to migration, and I was just in a district just yesterday, and they were talking about the breakage in a social contract, that idea that the 100% school attendance is no longer a highly held value. So we are appreciative of the efforts of the governor and legislature to begin the public conversation on foundation aid. Just as education is the backbone of our state's future, foundation is the infrastructure of state aid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Anna Hall, CEO of the Northeast Charter School Network.
Good afternoon. My name is Anna Hall, and I'm the CEO of the Northeast Charter Schools Network, which is the umbrella organization for both the New York Charter Schools Association and the Connecticut Charter Schools Association. I'm honored to be here today as the representative of New York's over 350 charter schools, serving almost 200,000 students across the state, from Elmira to East New York, from the Bronx to here in Buffalo. I'm also excited to be here today as a not-so-secret education funding policy wonk. My Harvard master's thesis was on Massachusetts Chapter 70, which is New York, the equivalent of New York's foundation aid formula, and I've been hooked on education funding ever since. At the risk of reaching too far back in my own history and to what was literally an academic exercise, I would highlight the central premise of that thesis, which is relevant even today, which is that the best education funding formulas are both equitable as well as transparent. And I think one thing that we can all agree on, regardless of any potential difference in perspective about charter schools, is that we're here today, and you fine folks are crisscrossing the state over the summer, so thank you for that, because neither of those things are currently true, despite the fact that New York spends the most per pupil on education of any state in the nation. Unlike Massachusetts Chapter 70, as well as many similar state education funding policies in states that New York policymakers would consider peers, charter schools in New York are not funded as part of the most basic, literally foundational funding formula that distributes the vast majority of state education funds. Many other speakers earlier today, as well as in last week's forum, and I'm sure many yet to come, have called the foundation aid formula outdated. We in the charter community wholeheartedly agree. But as long as we're looking at the metaphorical best by dates in the education funding refrigerator, I would note that the charter funding formula predates the foundation aid formula. Now, to be clear, there is no winner in the contest of which container you'd rather not open. The charter funding formula did not anticipate foundation aid, and arguably, while foundation aid should have anticipated charter funding, it did that, among many other things that other speakers have already cited, poorly. This was maybe understandable in the early years of the charter sector when a relatively small number of charter schools existed and did not reflect the enrollment and demographics that are true today. Charter schools now serve a larger percentage of economically disadvantaged students in 2/3 of the districts in which they're located. On average, 82% of charter students are economically disadvantaged compared to 75% in their host districts. And in 1/3 of charter schools, more than 90% of students qualify as economically disadvantaged. These students generate foundation aid for their host districts, and yet the schools that their parents have chosen for them receive dramatically less public funding than the equivalent district school they might otherwise attend. To that end, we offer the following 3.5 recommendations. Number one, as others have previously said, truly revisit and revise the foundation aid formula. I won't go into the laundry list of acronyms, outdated years, measures, indices, but so many of the building blocks of the original model have fundamental cracks in them and cannot be patched, but must be replaced and rebuilt. A true reformation of the formula will take time and consensus. We believe it's worth the effort, and we're ready to participate in that. Here's the 1/2 recommendation. Would specifically underscore the need to revisit the mechanism for calculating aid for students with disabilities. Prior speakers have noted the current blanket weight of 1.41 for students with disabilities ignores the modern understanding of the range of interventions as well as the costs associated with them. Ironically, charter schools entirely agree because we have historically been funded, albeit in many cases at a lower absolute dollar amount, based on student service levels. So we know exactly how important and impactful that approach can be. We stand with our district counterparts to highlight this as one of many areas where the fundamental premise of the foundation aid formula do not reflect the more modern understanding of student needs and best practices almost a quarter of a century after the formula was created. Number two, include charter schools in a thoroughly revised formula, not only in terms of enrollment, but also as well as funding. Put simply, there is no legitimate outcome of a new formula that excludes hundreds of thousands of low-income and minority public school students. 3, by including charter schools in a revised formula, allow charter funding to flow directly to charter schools from the state, as opposed to through districts. In New York, charter schools are their own LEAs in almost all other ways. The current pass-through nature of state funds through districts to charter schools has exacerbated an antagonism between charter schools and their host districts, putting systems and a sense of competition before students and their families. Equitable funding must not be contingent on the type of public school that a student attends.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions? Susan Gray, Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations at the Clyde-Savannah Central School District.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Gray, and I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations at the Clyde-Savannah Central School District, a small, high-needs, rural district located in Wayne County in the scenic Finger Lakes region between Rochester and Syracuse. I'm here representing the New York State Association of School Business Officials, where I'm a member and have served on the Government Relations Committee for many years. I appreciate the opportunity you have given us to offer testimony today. Foundation aid is the primary revenue source for many school districts. For example, my district receives approximately 75% of its revenue from state aid. Any changes to the formula, even small ones, have a major impact on our budget. If changes in the formula cause aid to decrease, my community cannot handle a large increase in the tax levy to make up the difference. They struggle with additional needs for mental health services, housing, childcare, and food assistance, and they would not be able to bear additional tax burdens. One of the factors in the current formula has to do with enrollment. It's my understanding that student enrollment has decreased for many districts in New York State, according to the current formula would decrease their aid. However, even in my district of around 750 students, if we lose 75 of them, or about 10% of our population, the loss would not be from one grade level, but likely a few from each grade level, which means we would not be able to reduce teaching staff. District needs have evolved, and we have many fixed expenses that would not decrease. We all still have greater costs for staffing, maintenance of our facilities, utilities, safety, security, technology, and transportation. Coupled with that, we are still facing higher prices for goods and services and have had to increase staffing salaries and benefits to be competitive when hiring. While some districts may have lost students over the last few years, they have greater obligations to provide additional services and pay for unfunded mandates. Students have increasingly complex and expensive needs, including emotional support programs and intensive remediation. We have a greater number of students who are English language learners, experiencing homelessness, living in poverty, and are presenting with disabilities. Enrollment decline does not mean we require less funding. Today's needs shift the funding to other areas which school districts are expected to meet. These needs have increased exponentially since the inception of the original foundation aid formula. Another factor in the current formula is the combined wealth ratio. On the lakes in our beautiful Finger Lakes region, we have many expensive vacation properties which are not the primary residences of owners. With the tax cap in place, our ability to increase taxes on these properties is very limited, but their value makes district residents appear to have more property wealth than they do. When it comes to data, there are multiple resources available, and I would like to add that school districts are very transparent about how we are allocating our funding and our levels of reserves, which have planned uses and can mitigate unforeseen expenditures. Reserve information is detailed extensively in our annual financial statements, which are public documents and published on district websites. Reserves are also detailed as part of the property tax report card, which is filed with the state and provided to the public each spring prior to our budget votes. The transparency report that ended last year was one of 2 such reports and was duplicative. It also was not as accurate a report of where districts actually spend their funds, as it was based on budgeted amounts, not actual expenses. The transparency report we are still required to file each year contains accurate information about where we have spent the previous year's funds, including by building, grade level, and different areas such as special education and English language learners. Finally, the financial transparency section of each school's New York State report card also details information regarding our uses of funding. All of this information is very transparent and readily and publicly available. As complicated as the formula is, I don't necessarily feel that you need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to calculating aid to schools districts. If the information that is used within the formula is current and certain data points reflect a truer picture of each district, it may work as intended. That being said, much has changed since its inception. When the current formula was developed, the tax cap did not exist. For business officials, the most frustrating aspect of school aid is not only the outdated factors, but the altering of the formula itself. Each year, we hold our collective breaths, waiting and wondering to see how much foundation aid we will receive and what parts of the formula may have been changed. This year, hold harmless was an issue, as well as the manipulation of the CPI factor in the formula. This lack of predictability is one of our greatest challenges and is politically influenced to the detriment of our students. What we would ask in an updated formula is regular review and updates of factors, including a move away from the reduced and free lunch figures as a measure. This information is not easily obtained, especially if districts are part of the community eligibility provision. Update the foundation amount model and keep the inflation factor as needed. We are looking for a formula that is simple, fair, stable, sustainable, and predictable. A formula that is less volatile. Remove the ability to change components of the formula to meet various political needs of the state. Revamping the foundation aid formula is a daunting task within the timeline you have been given, and I do not envy the work you have ahead. The formula cannot be a one-size-fits-all type of calculation because there are different needs in different parts of the state and even different needs within districts in the same BOCES regions. We are all unique but tasked with doing the same thing, meeting the needs of all students balanced with the needs of the communities in which they live. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Questions, comments? David Lowrey, Area 1 Director for the New York State School Boards Association and board member of the Erie 2 Chautauqua Cattaraugus BOCES Board of Education.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak about the New York State Foundation Aid formula and just share one story. My name is David Lowrey. It has been a pleasure to serve on the Iroquois Board of Education for about 20 years, starting in 1987. I am now on the Erie 2 BOCES Board of Education. I was blessed to be able to be educated in the 60s and 70s. It seems that we had anything that was really needed back then to provide for a high-quality education. Today, the services for students are much more comprehensive. Mandates have increased. The foundation aid formula is no longer able to keep up with the educational and societal changes, let alone providing for a basic education to meet the needs of a diverse student population. I taught and was a teacher leader at Lockport High School. I now serve as the executive director for Erie County Association of School Boards. At the end of every committee meeting during our roundtable discussions, I hear about programs that are being provided at different schools. Unfortunately, not all districts have the financial means to have the same or similar programs. Most recently, I was elected to serve as the New York State School Boards Association Area 1 Director. While employed at Lockport High School, I was involved in a program called the CORE program. We created a unique program that targeted 60 incoming regular education freshman students that were at a lower achievement level and were most at risk of failing or dropping out of school. As regular education students, they lacked the necessary skills to be successful and did not qualify for an IEP or 504 plan. We had 4 core subject teachers, a low teacher, a physical education teacher, and me serving as an art teacher. We had a dedicated assistant principal and counselor. The program made many adaptations to better help the students. We had longer class periods, special open houses, additional family supports, and field trips to local businesses. We had motivational speakers, additional technology supports, and increased communication to the students' families. The 60 students became a family of learners. As a result of the program, all 60 students ended their freshman year with 6.5 credits. We did not change any grades. We made no changes in the curriculum. We just focused our efforts on the students' needs, which were many times above and beyond that of what a regular education student would have received. The students were successfully on their way to an on-time graduation. They struggled to maintain the same level of academic achievement in their sophomore year without the supports and interventions. We just hoped and prayed that the students would at least make it to their junior year where they might be able to be enrolled in a different learning environment, such as a career and technical education program that might be a better fit for their learning style. The CORE program ended after 3 years because it was not sustainable. With the closing of the program, the same group of caring educators developed what we referred to as the student-based support team. I chaired multiple teams in addition to teaching my full course load. Every quarter, we would review the list of students failing 3 or more subjects. We met with the students, their parents, teachers, and counselors, hopefully to get them back on track. We would provide advice and, where we could, support and interventions for the students. We were able to help some students, however, other students slid through the cracks. Fast forward to April 2024, I attended the National School Boards Association Convention in New Orleans. I attended the Magna Awards where the Orleans-Niagara BOCES, located in Niagara County, had a program that was receiving a grand prize of $10,000 for their Second Chance program, focusing on corrections and literacy skills in conjunction with the Niagara County Jail. One of the students in the program on the video that BOCES share with the audience was J.J. Hillman. Our student-based support team met several times with J.J. as he struggled academically. He eventually dropped out of high school. In his own words, he says, "I made some poor choices." In his words, "I was not smart enough to do well in school." He earned a degree through the Second Chance program. He said he now believes in himself and realizes he can do anything he puts his mind to. He further states that if it weren't for the program, he would not know what a real hero is. He emphatically states, "They saved me." As I watched the video, it brought a tear to my eye because I realized that I failed him as the chair of the student-based support team. The Lockport City School District failed him because they were not able to provide for the necessary services and interventions that were necessary. The state education department failed him, and New York State failed him. As I started thinking about Foundation Aid and JJ, I thought to myself, if schools don't have enough funding for the education of students, where is the state finding the money to re-educate and rehabilitate these very same students? I ask you to remember J.J. Hillman and many other students that will look at you as their hero because you gave them a chance and saved them through a review of the Foundation Aid formula that will stay up to date with the current needs and provide necessary funds needed for today's students. The current Foundation Aid formula does not take into account students like J.J. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions? Maureen Donahue, Superintendent of the Southwestern Central School District.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to Buffalo, New York. Thank you for the opportunity to share our testimony today regarding school funding in New York State. I'm grateful that you have given value to our input as we move forward for a fair, predictable, and equitable funding formula. As you said, my name is Maureen Donahue, and I'm the superintendent of the Southwestern Central School District in Jamestown, New York, and a past president of the New York State Council of School Superintendents. I'm entering my 40th year in public education and my 20th year as a school superintendent. Education funding is not a cost that should be minimized, but rather viewed as an investment in the future of each one of our children. It is our greatest responsibility to invest in our children to ensure success for every child, every day, across our 716 region in the state of New York. We must find a path that is fair as well as sustainable. I've seen many changes in schools over my 40 years as a public educator, but none as comprehensive and challenging as in what schools have experienced in the last 5 years. Our roles and responsibilities continue to evolve with a greater need in special education, social, emotional, mental health services, food aid to families and kids, family supports, after-school academic support, alternative educational settings, and support for chronic absenteeism. This year, my district, our district, fell to Save Harmless, giving us no additional foundation aid to help in meeting student needs that continue to grow. As an average need district, our overall free and reduced lunch has increased from 24% to 40% in 10 years and continues to go up, which is a direct correlation to increased needs and services needed to our students, and still we are considered average. Since 2020, our region continues to experience chronic absenteeism, increased mental health needs, need for added family supports, and an increased need for after-school academic and social emotional services. Weekly, our school principals, our school resource officer, counseling staff complete daily home visits to address absenteeism, school avoidance, family conflict, and mental health needs of our students. Accessing mental health services during the school day to support students in a rural region has been challenging due to lack of resources and availability. When those services are unavailable, it falls back to the school to provide immediate support for students and their families. Prior to 2020, students with challenging behaviors and significant mental health needs were often placed out of the home and our region. The state has pivoted to keeping kids in their home, resulting in greater long-term success for our kids. Educating those students requires added support and services, with most of the support provided by the school district. The past few years, our staff has been called upon after hours to provide needed support when other resources cannot be accessed. On a Saturday morning this last year, our school resource officer, the principal, myself as a superintendent, and our counseling staff were called upon by law enforcement to aid one of our families that had experienced a violent, aggressive domestic incident on a Saturday. We were able to immediately provide support, resources, and needed information to assist authorities with our family. As a rural district with a very transient population, on an average, we provide 6 separate bus routes daily minimally to students who are homeless. This involves individualized transportation on an average of 20 to 40 miles away. All these experiences point to the need for the formula to give greater weight to student needs in calculating the formula aid. In addition to replacing the flawed measures of student poverty now in use, census poverty rates and free and reduced Puntschenko eligibility data. The state must do more to help districts with special education costs. In 2007, what had been the largest special ed aid category was folded into the foundation aid. That was a mistake then that cannot be entirely fixed now. It reduced predictability and funding for our districts. The old formula cannot be resurrected, but something has to be done. A student in our area served in a 611 classroom with related services cost is approximately $100,000. Once the stack process and the state aid formula are applied, the local share is $50,000. This is a significant impact given that a 1% property tax increase in our district is $125,000. Schools face other common costs on school safety. Schools work closely with local law enforcement to mitigate all threats. I encourage you to prioritize a funding formula that provides adequate and predictable school funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I didn't want to go over that 6 minutes.
You don't
I was
want to,
afraid
right?
of you, Anita.
Eamonn Scanlon, Director of Community Impact for the Children's Agenda. Did I do that? Did I get that right?
Nobody ever gets that right. You are a select few. Good for you. So yes, good afternoon. My name is Eamonn Scanlon. I am the Director of Community Impact at the Children's Agenda, and we are located in Rochester, New York. The Children's Agenda is a nonpartisan organization that advocates for effective policies and drives evidence-based solutions for the health, education, and success of children. We are especially committed to children who are vulnerable because of poverty, racism, health inequities, and trauma. In 2017, the Children's Agenda joined other advocates, many who had been working on equitable school funding for decades, in calling on New York State to fully fund the Foundation Aid formula. Foundation aid is critical for high-need school districts because it is often their single largest source of operating aid. Foundation aid is also the primary driver of school funding equity in our state, as it recognizes the cost of adequately educating students is higher for those living in poverty, acquiring English as a second language, and those with intellectual or developmental disabilities. We thank Governor Hochul and the New York State Legislature for finally fully funding the Foundation Aid formula in the 23-24 school year. Now that full implementation has been reached, the state must shift its attention to improving the formula to better represent the full cost of an adequate education and to use the best measurements of student need. First, the base amount methodology, as some have hinted to, should be revisited, possibly looking at other models like New Jersey's, which uses a professional judgment panel of experts that will define the staff, programs, and other resources needed to operate school buildings. The cost of funding a successful school district, which is what the model currently does, looks at all districts equally using an average district of need. But there are vast differences between a highly thriving suburban district, a small rural community, or a high-needs urban environment. Costing out these different models should be the first step in building the base amount. The current formula uses weights for poverty based on free and reduced lunch counts and outdated 2000 census data. A more accurate and possible current data point could be the number of children enrolled in Medicaid. Further, the formula should explore using a differentiated approach with added weights for higher concentrations of poverty, as 90% poverty levels are far different than 50%, are far different from 20%. Similarly, there are no weights within the formula for various student populations, some which have been previously mentioned. SIFE students, or students with interrupted formal education, need specialized programming as they integrate into the setting and as they have not had formal education, sometimes for many years. Additional weights could be for foster care students and McKinney-Bento students. And I think using the broadest form and definition for homelessness is the best approach in that model. Also, we should revisit the true cost of multilingual learning, as that programming has grown much larger in New York State over the last 20 years. And we should explore a differentiated approach based on NICELT scores, which measure the differences in English proficiency for English language learners. And that mix can be very different across districts who may have the same numbers. Funding for special education, which is very complicated and can cause different types of incentives, either for overclassification or underclassification based on the model, should be carefully revisited and differentiated to the best possible approach, because there are vast differences in cost based on educational settings. And so, as was also mentioned in a 611 or a 1211, those costs are much higher, and so having different weights based on the educational settings may be one approach to better capturing costs. You should also consider phasing out the hold harmless funding, which runs counter to equity goals. However, exploring mechanisms for transitional aid for school districts that have declining enrollment would be a good approach. Finally, pre-K funding remains a separate grant that does not keep up with rising costs the way foundation aid does, and does not by having an annual inflation adjustment. Pre-K funding should be better integrated into the foundation aid formula to ensure sustainability and quality for pre-K programs. The current pre-K funding model is already showing cracks as early adopters, like the Rochester City School District, are being forced to borrow from other non-pre-K funding streams to maintain quality. This erodes the effectiveness of foundation aid, which is the principal source of alternative funding to support pre-K programs. Better integrating these models is the best approach. While today we have talked at length about the parameters of the formula so that it may be improved, it is important to acknowledge the greatest threats to adequate and equitable funding are fluctuations in New York State's economy and the competing spending priorities of political leaders in Albany. A formula meant to equalize the funding capacity of poor and wealthy communities while also accounting for the cost of education to students' bodies that vary greatly in terms of need is only effective if it is fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nita Karbacka, President of the Advisory Committee for Association of Small City School District, and a member of the Jamestown Board.
Good afternoon. My name is Nina Karbacka. I'm a member of the Jamestown Board of Education and past president of New York State Association of Small City School Districts. I have a master's in education and taught for Jamestown for 41 years. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. Small cities like Jamestown are typically high-need, low-wealth districts, which means we are highly dependent on state aid to provide a sound basic education for our children. 85% of our children in Jamestown are economically disadvantaged. The combined wealth ratio of Jamestown is 0.254, far below the state average of 1, and making us the fourth poorest district in the state. This should be fairly reflected in our foundation aid calculation. 83% of Jamestown's budget comes from state aid, the majority of which is foundation aid. When you combine the wealth issues and support issues, the result is many of our small cities need more support than their tax base can provide, necessitating help from the state in form of foundation aid. It is very important that the state has a current and accurate picture of our districts with the use of current data. Our demographics and economics change from year to year. Our students living in poverty in Jamestown has gone up 56% since the 2008-2009 year. Please consider this as you work to update the formula. The data also needs to be very specific and targeted. Children and their needs are very different. For example, not all ENL students are the same. Some students come with an educational background in their native language, reading and writing at grade level or beyond, while others come with little or no schooling, facing literacy challenges in their native tongue. The needed services to help these children succeed is very different. This is just one example of how the data cannot be a template allocating funds to a broad category. There needs to be a recognition of individual difference and the different levels of support needed. Foundation aid is not just a number for our small cities, it's what drives success of our students. It what pays for AIS services to help our students become successful and graduate high school. Using Jamestown as an example again, Steve Ewing did a report for small cities and the Maisto case, showing that Jamestown should have 29 more AIS teachers in reading and 85 more AIS teachers in math to adequately help our students. Jamestown's pupil needs index is 1.66, quite high. Currently, we have 43% of our students in grade 3 through 8 scoring 1 on the state tests. Our graduation rate is 70. These dismal numbers could be helped with sufficient state aid and are the product of reduced state aid over many years. Another area of need is professional development. We need to train our teachers in AI to enable our students to become responsible users of this exciting new technology. This is a new world with amazing possibilities if approached correctly. We need workshops in restorative justice, mental health issues, as well as new academic initiatives such as the Science of Reading, which is spearheaded by the governor. Built into foundation aid should be professional development funds. Jamestown and many other small cities cannot afford the thousands of dollars necessary to bring in a fine clinician to train our staff. We need to give our students the advantage of the best, most current education possible and a well-trained staff. As you look at the formula, you need to consider the fact that small cities like Jamestown are relying on you to update the formula to allocate the funds fairly, allowing us to educate our students in the best possible way. For years, we have not been given full foundation aid, while other districts are given over 100% of the formula calculation. Please consider a way to provide all students with the resources necessary for a sound basic education. Our children deserve to have the services they need to succeed and the opportunity to leave school prepared for the workplace and higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Mike Puntschenko, Chief Financial Officer for the Syracuse City School District. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Puntschenko, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Syracuse City School District. I am grateful for this opportunity to speak to you, and I promise I will not use all of the allotted 6 minutes to share my ideas on how to fix the foundation aid formula. It has already been too many years without answers or changes, and 6 minutes just isn't enough time. Instead, I want to take these 6 minutes to speak to you about Syracuse, so that when you are confronted with these challenging decisions ahead of you, perhaps some of my words will resonate, and you'll be able to envision how these decisions will impact one of the largest school districts in New York State. Syracuse is a unique city, whereby more than half of our properties do not contribute to the local tax base. We have tax-exempt institutes of higher education, hospitals, houses of worship, community-based organizations, vacant properties, a land bank, and pilot agreements, which severely limit our ability to secure property tax funding from the city of Syracuse. As a dependent school district, we do not have the authority to raise local property tax revenue and must rely on the city, the mayor, and the common council to arbitrarily determine how much funding we will receive from the property taxes. 5 years ago, the district received $61 million, or 12% of our revenue from the city, and this past year we received $63.7 million, which now represents less than 10% of the total revenue we receive. This amount of property tax revenue received is the lowest among the Big Five. The percentage of our local tax revenue in relation to our overall budget has declined each year for the past 14 years. going from 14% to 9.7% this past year. This is a concerning trend, which has made us extremely dependent upon state aid. This past school year, over 84% of our revenue comes from state aid. How these funds are derived in the foundation aid formula is paramount to our future and the success of our students. Syracuse is also a city in transition with an optimistic vision for what the future will hold, with the addition of Micron and the many subsets of businesses that will be calling our community home in the coming years. But today, based upon the 2022 census data on cities with more than 100,000 people, Syracuse holds the unenviable distinction of having the highest child poverty in New York State, and we are the second worst in the entire nation. Almost half of our children live in poverty using this measure, and under the federal free reduced price guidelines, where the household median income threshold is lower, 86% of our students are considered living in poverty. The poverty in Syracuse has steadily grown since 2000, but the calculation of pupil needs index and the foundation aid formula has not changed and currently uses outdated 2000 census data. This calculation greatly affects our funding while not accurately reflecting the current population of students we serve. In addition, utilizing the free and reduced punch data is less accurate because student counts are underreported in districts like Syracuse who are part of the community eligibility provision. Poverty data from other sources, such as the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimate, may be better than census or FERPA data. SAPE data includes all students residing in the district, while FERPA only includes the students attending public schools. The number of high-need students continues to rise across the state, and we are all acutely aware that the cost to provide these students with a sound basic education is greater. In Syracuse, over 17% of our students are English language learners, many of whom come to our schools mid-year with little to no English proficiency, let alone any formal education. The current foundation aid formula does not appropriately address the needs of these students, nor does it address any mid-year additional expenses that we may incur. Over 10% of our students are homeless. We ended this past school year with over 2,000 students without a home. This is greater than the entire enrollment of many of the school districts that have been speaking before you. These students come to school hungry, tired, and unprepared to concentrate on the lessons in front of them. These percentages and numbers are not seen outside the Big Five, and they're multiple times greater than our suburban and rural counterparts. In Syracuse, over 20% of our students have special education identification. In the past 3 years, we are finding that more and more children are in need of special education services, particularly our youngest learners, who were not able to access or benefit from special education services during the pandemic. In addition to the increasing enrollment numbers of these students and the required services that we must provide to them are more comprehensive and therefore more costly than they were a decade ago. The current formula includes limited weightings for these and other high-need special education students, but also doesn't differentiate between the severity of need. Our combined wealth ratio, 31%, is less than 1/3 that of the average New York State school district. The district's pupil demographics, poverty rates, and wealth measures highlight our reliance on the state for adequate funding, especially as we continue to accommodate the academic and emotional needs of our children as we transition to a post-pandemic reality. The school system has no control over our community's wealth, so why are we penalized by the minimum limit within the Income Wealth Index? This is a measure of wealth in a district that is used to determine the local contribution in the formula. Currently, the Income Wealth Index is limited to a minimum of 0.65 and a maximum of 2. Syracuse's Income Wealth Index would be 0.32 if this limit were not in place. The current restrictions make the district look wealthier due to the minimum cap, and therefore we receive less aid. Conversely, districts with more wealth appear less wealthy due to the maximum cap and receive more aid at the expense of those of us on the other side of the spectrum. Lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the elimination of the C4E and the community school set-asides. While this funding is critical, how those resources can be used is often just as important. We know our students, teachers, and families, so let the school districts determine how those funds will be expended to best meet the needs of our unique populations. Please don't limit the use of our resources with arbitrarily determined set-asides. On behalf of the Superintendent Davis and the Syracuse School Board, I thank you for this time and look forward to our ongoing collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Patricia Frazier, member of the New York State Parent Teachers Association.
Good afternoon. My name is Patty Frazier. I am the past state treasurer of New York State PTA and a proud member of the Western Region PTA, the Williamsville PTA, and the Buffalo Community PTA. I want to thank local volunteer leader Jill Patterson from Western Region PTA and Buffalo Community PTSA, and Cindy Ames from Niagara Region PTA and Newfane PTSA, who joined me here today and collaborated on these remarks. We understand funding issues because our PTAs are in the schools. We understand the services our districts provide because our members are recipients. We are part of small districts where students number in the hundreds to the second largest district in the state with the Buffalo Public Schools. We are in rural, suburban, and urban districts. We are in high-achieving schools and schools that are failing. We and the 9,053 PTA members in the 75 PTA units in Western Region and the 2,083 members in the 19 PTA units in Niagara Region work cooperatively to see that every child and their families are supported in and out of our school buildings. PTAs play an integral role and continue our mission to be a powerful voice for all children, a relevant resource for families and communities, and a strong advocate for the education and well-being of every child. Our credentials as the second largest education stakeholder group in New York State are presented in our written report. We are grateful for this opportunity to stand before you and to represent our 225,000 members and the parents and families of our 2.6 million public school children. It is our mission to make every child's potential a reality and support every child with one voice. Western Region PTA, through its efforts in the school communities of Chautauqua, Cattaraugus, Erie, Genesee, and Wyoming counties, and Niagara Region PTA of Niagara and Orleans counties, appreciate the opportunity to reflect on the future of foundation aid and how changes can impact, benefit, and support children and families statewide. Thank you to the Rockefeller Institute for taking on this critical work and your commitment to all children, their families, and our schools. Our area of the state serves nearly 200,000 students, the majority qualifying for free and reduced price lunch. Every student in New York and in Western New York needs our support to receive a high-quality, 21st century education that meets global workforce demands and supports their academic, mental, social, and emotional needs. When first enacted in 2007, Foundation Aid had the hope and promise of supporting and funding a sound basic education for all children. In the past 17 years, our schools have changed. The demands upon our students have changed. The global workforce has changed, and most importantly, the needs of our students have changed. When you begin reworking the Foundation Aid formula, we ask that you recognize that monies entering schools aren't just serving the educational needs of our community, but also the well-being, health care, social success, and security, just to name a few issues that face our children. I want to focus on one specific funding need in our schools, the need to support student mental health. Our schools struggle with having the necessary funds to provide meaningful mental health services and school counseling to our children. A recent New York State Controller audit found that 50% of New York schools do not meet the recommended ratio of one school psychologist for every 500 students. We also fall short in the school counselor ratio, which sits at 333 counselors to every one student, far short of the recommendation of 250 to 1. Parents and families are asking for help. In fall 2023, New York State PTA issued its second mental health survey for parents, families, and educators. The results showed alarming trends led by anxiety, struggles with social media, and depression. We cannot talk about the future of public education in New York State without addressing these student needs through mental health support. We are excited about the Board of Regents' vision to restructure graduation requirements. New York State is truly on the verge of an educational transformation. Our school leaders, teachers, and students cannot do that work with a 17-year-old formula that doesn't include factors for the increased number of programs and services our schools must provide for our children. It's time to review student need indexes, reestablish growth aid, consider priority areas like addressing chronic absenteeism, allocate funding to provide a free and appropriate education to students with disabilities until age 22 or greater, make pre-kindergarten funding sustainable, expand career and technical education, and invest in school-based mental health services. Today's educational needs and what's needed to meet the forward-thinking recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission and Board of Regents require a new way to calculate adequate, equitable, and necessary support for students. We truly thank you for your commitment to our students, as we know your work will not be easy, but together we can make every child's potential a reality. No other work is more important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We are done with our list of invited speakers. We appreciate all of the speakers and the comments. Everything will be reviewed. Like I said, the Rockefeller Institute is looking at and listening to everyone. Our hearing is conducted and will, for this portion, and we'll continue tonight at 5:30 here. In the meantime, we're going to ask folks to leave so that the staff can get a break. So thank you again very much for attending.
Thank you, everybody.